What's up, guys? We are here for the MMA Meeting Podcast. Hope you guys are having an awesome day, man. Let's get into some MMA. There's quite a bit to talk about. Most of it is Colby and Leon stuff. Amazing fight coming up this Saturday, man. Crazy stacked card. So here's something interesting about the Leon Edwards and Colby Covington fight and what Stephen Thompson and Kamaru Usman think about that fight. They both give their opinions, and they're kind of different from each other. So Stephen Thompson is picking Leon to beat him. He's saying, look at the fight between Colby and Usman, how that played out. And then also look at that Leon is bigger than Colby Covington. He believes the fight is going to stay standing, as even Usman cannot hold down Leon. Leon took Usman down, something that Colby couldn't even do against Usman. Leon is going to be the better striker, and because the fight is going to be forced standing, Leon being the better striker is going to get ahead. Colby's weapons in the fight are cardio and pressure, and Edwards is dangerous from the beginning of the fight to the end of the fight. So a very general way to look at it, fight stays standing, Colby cannot keep him on the ground, and Leon's just going to beat him out on the feet. Usman says something a bit different. Usman didn't pick a winner necessarily, unless I missed that, but he was giving a lot of credit to Colby Covington in this fight. He says that Colby is going to continue to shoot and not deviate away from that game plan because he doesn't have confidence in his power in order to deviate. Right, a lot of wrestlers who have this takedown threat, they will get away from that initial game plan, trusting the power in their hands, but Colby doesn't have those kind of talents or attributes to deviate to. So he has that one thing that could work, and he's always going to keep at it regardless how many takedowns get defended or not. It's the whole game plan of shoot as many times as you can in order to win this fight, like Merab Dvalishvili has won a couple fights by doing that. And Usman believes that Colby Covington was able to keep the fight competitive with him. They're nearly even with each other. Even Usman admitted that. Credit to him for admitting something like that. And he says his fights with Leon Edwards, this is a bit of MMA math, so I don't really give too much cadence to this, but Usman does say that his fights with Leon Edwards, he never felt like Leon was keeping up with him for long durations of that fight. It was just like certain moments that Leon was able to get to him. And he said when he was wrestling with Leon, he never felt like he couldn't go to it. He never felt like there was some kind of resistance there. So he's pretty much comparing Colby Covington's wrestling with his own. And knowing that Usman did take down Leon multiple times in both fights, Colby should be able to do something similar with his kind of style. But his kind of style is a lot more relentless, and he won't deviate away from that like Usman will, trusting the power of his own hands. And that relentlessness can be a big problem for Leon Edwards. There are a lot of other things he didn't touch on, which I believe are also true. So I don't necessarily agree too much with Wonderboy's assessment of the fight. Not necessarily about the takedowns and stuff, because I can see a scenario where Leon does continuously stand up against Colby Covington, but then you have to remember what Usman said about Colby's relentlessness and constant spamming of takedowns. So regardless of how many times Leon gets up, Colby's going to try to get him down again, which could do a number on Leon's cardio that we haven't seen before. The main thing I disagree with Wonderboy is Edwards being dangerous from the beginning to the end. This is kind of saying that Leon fights the same from beginning to end, which is not necessarily true. Yes, now Leon's output would be somewhat similar from the beginning of the fight to the end, but the way that he throws and the stuff that he does is quite different. Leon does a lot of his reads in the beginning of a fight. He carries those late, but adjustments and additions to that. So he will create initial reads by feints, throwing out some good feelers, touching before he commits earlier in the fight. Now, against a guy like Colby Covington, who will present a lot of openings, especially down the center, as he does enter in with a wide center opening, Leon could be quite dangerous in the beginning of the fight, specifically in this one, if he wants to take that kind of risk before making certain reads. Colby will have some generic openings that you don't really need too many reads to capitalize on for. The main thing are going to be the level changes, right? The level changes could sometimes come out suddenly before the opponent expects those. And Leon may need to have some kind of read in order to intercept that if he wants to time those knees, if he wants to drive in the underhooks and force a clinch so he can start implementing more elbows and knees in there, and then left hands off the break. Force breaks for a good follow-up, because if Colby's going to be forcing the breaks, he's going to stick in close enough where Leon can't really extend his longer limbs, right? He won't be able to extend too many of those left hands or high kicks or stuff like that if Colby's the one that's forcing breaks. So Leon's got to be the one that forces breaks in order to create more separation between him and Colby and capitalize on those. And a wrestler's general instinct after a forced break is going to be some form of aggression, a forward step, another shot, an overhand, That's usually where you're going to see from a lot of wrestlers who get disengaged from. Now, Leon's footwork can eliminate some kind of that aggression, exiting away immediately, but that's going to cause him to not try to capitalize on that kind of break. It's going to be more focusing on escaping the cage and getting away from reinforced takedowns. Robert Whittaker has also talked about this fight. He says if you were to ask him before the Leon and Usman fights, he would say that Colby Covington absolutely winning. He's way too relentless, similar kind of reasons. He's so pressuring, so much output, stuff like that, right? But then when he saw the last Leon and Usman fight, he says that's how Leon can beat Colby Covington. He thinks that Colby has a problem with guys he can't just walk into and take down. And that's what he saw in the Usman fights. He couldn't walk through the punches and take him down. And if he can't take him down like that, it's going to be hard for him to wear him down. And Leon showed that he could defend some of Usman's takedowns and threaten that open space. He believes it can make Colby worried about entering. He also says that Leon being a southpaw is a great advantage for him, but Colby's also southpaw, and Leon will switch to the opposite stance of his opponent, so he might take orthodox in this. But the fact that Colby is a wrestler, maybe he keeps the southpaw. Leon could go for both. It depends on what he's trying to do initially in those moments, but he can also switch back and forth inside that fight. But Leon creating danger in that open space is going to cause Colby to get worried. I can see this to be true probably later in the fight. In the beginning of the fight, Leon is going to have to feel some things out before he does that. Now, again, like I talked about before, perhaps because of Colby's just general openings, Leon does not need feelers in order to execute. But generally speaking, he does that, right? Regardless of who his opponent is. Many different styles he's go up against, right? He calculates a lot, he downloads data a lot before he fires stuff with real power. And if you cannot get the openings and the timing of Colby down, Colby's not going to allow him to get those timings later in the fight, right? Because if he's glued onto him against the cage, Leon's timing is not going to be in that open space anymore. Leon's going to gather the timing, not in that open space. He's going to gather it in the clinch of when to disengage, when Colby shoots, how relentless that pressure actually is going to be when they're tied together, when to attack with the knees, when to attack with the elbows. That's more of where his timing is going to come from. For example, what Usman said. Usman said that he will deviate away from a wrestling game plan for his boxing. And because he does that, it's going to give Leon that timing in the open space. But Colby doesn't necessarily fight like that. He doesn't give you as many moments in neutral to work with. But then again, there are a lot of openings he will give you when he does pressure, and maybe feeling that out 1 or 2 times can give Leon all he needs to calculate for. So it's interesting. So out of these 3 fighters, Usman has the best analysis, from my opinion, but of course he's going to know more because he fought the 2 guys. He understands their games more than any other fighter. He gives a lot of respect to Colby Covington, which is nice to see, you know. After their second fight together, you were able to see that they definitely have respect for each other. Colby, of course, is playing a character, and Usman sees that too. It'd be awesome to see one day if these guys can be friends and stuff like that, hang out, you know, when it's all said and done. Another thing that Kamaru Usman talked about was about Colby Covington getting so much promotion for the fight. He's like the focal point of promotion at this point. Leon was talking about how the UFC and even the former president are rooting for Covington to win. This is what Leon was saying. And then Usman just came out and said that it's a company. They're going to promote the fighter that they think they'll make the most money from. So Usman's telling Leon, if you have some kind of issue with that, change that narrative. Become the star. Become the guy that the UFC backs up. If you want to change that, if you don't want Colby Covington to get that kind of publicity and stuff, then you become the star. You become the guy that they promote. Because let's be honest here, man. Leon is a great fighter. He does some amazing stuff out there. But he's not a super interesting personality. And a lot of the fans, especially the casual fans, that's what they gravitate towards. Colby Covington is not some knockout artist. He's not fighting like Francis Ngannou out there. But people watch him. And the fact that Usman, who is part of 2 fights with Colby Covington, is saying that they get behind him also points to the narrative that Colby does bring in numbers. If I'm not wrong, Usman didn't really knock any of that. He didn't get upset about Colby Covington getting a bit of special treatment and stuff like that because he's also benefiting from that as the champion. Leon is also benefiting from Colby Covington's push. This is a money fight for him. This is a big fight that people are going to watch. If Leon wants to get people to back him up like that, he's got to be some kind of interesting personality or at least have a sort of fighting style that is hard to miss. Like a Anderson Silva, for an example. Anderson wasn't the most interesting personality outside the cage, but he was a big star because of what he was able to do inside the cage. Leon is not some kind of knockout artist, right? He doesn't have a long history of spectacular performances, KOing that guy, front kicking this guy, countering this guy, putting him down. Most of his wins are looking like a kind of a point fight. And the general public is what makes you a star, what makes you money. The head kick was beautiful against Usman. That was a big thing for his star power. Him being from the UK is a big thing for his star power. That can't just be it though, right? You can't just be riding off of one big knockout and coming from a certain country. You gotta have more to you. If he could go out there and KO Colby Covington, right? Let's say he times a knee, first round, knocks out Colby, amazing post-fight interview, demands respect and stuff like that, then it's gonna be a bit different, you know? Then people start to look at Leon Edwards in a different light. But if he goes out there, whether he wins or loses, and just goes to a decision, doesn't really getting any big moments like that, he can't have that crazy, electrifying post-fight interview. So it's just going to look kind of dull to a lot of the casual fans. With Colby Covington, they're expecting some craziness to come out of his mouth. And they're expecting some kind of high pace, relentless aggression from his end. You guys see Tom Aspinall's situation as a champion? So Jalin Almeida is going to be fighting Curtis Blades, right? That means the option of a number one contender fight between Almeida and Gane is now eliminated for the moment. Dana just came out and said that Jon Jones and Stipe are going to fight each other. It's not going to be Aspinall. So that zones in the interim champion to either accept or refuse one opponent, Ciryl Gane. It looks like they want Ciryl Gane to get another title shot against the interim champion Tom Aspinall. This will be a second shot at an interim title for Ciryl Gane, his fourth chance at any title in the heavyweight division in like the last couple of years. I don't know if there's another heavyweight that's gotten as many title shots as Ciryl Gane has at this point. If he gets this one, right? If he gets this one, of course. Now, as a fight fan at the end of the day, I don't mind too much as I do want to see fights. But to be fair, the fair thing to do would be, of course, have Aspinall versus Jon Jones. Jon Jones is injured right now, so that can't happen at the moment. When the undisputed champion is injured, the interim champion has to either defend or the undisputed gets stripped. We know Jones ain't gonna get stripped, so that will lead to Aspinall to have to defend his belt against the other contenders. Stipe Miocic is the one that deserves a title shot at this point for two different reasons. Number one, he was on a credible long reign. As many people say, the greatest heavyweight of all time who just lost his belt. He's the kind of guy that deserves another crack at the title, especially when there's not a default next competitor. Who's the next contender that deserves it? Like, for an example, Dricus du Plessis deserves a middleweight title shot. There is no heavyweight that deserves a shot like that right now. So Stipe versus Tom Aspinall is a fight that I think should get put together. But we do know Aspinall will do bad things to Stipe. And yes, a lot of that has to do with the fact that Stipe is much older now. Prime versus Prime would have been an interesting fight. But at 43 years old, getting knocked out, a lot of damage, went through wars, I think it's logical to think that Stipe Miocic would not have as good of a chance against someone like Aspinall. But if Aspinall beats Stipe, what does that do to Jon Jones? It doesn't give him that fight that he wants. That's the main reason this fight is probably not happening. Let's save Stipe for Jon Jones. Because if we put him against anybody else at this moment, there is a likely chance that he could lose. And if he loses, that Jones and Stipe fight gets lost as well. But the reason why that makes the most sense is because if Aspinall goes out and beats Stipe, then you put him against Jones when he comes back. That's what you're supposed to do, right? The interim champ is supposed to unify the belts. There's a lot of hints that Jon Jones is going to retire after. Man, I miss when the interim champs actually meant something. Like Renan Baral's interim championship, like Carlos Condit's, like Robert Whittaker's even did kind of, but he didn't have the opportunity to fight Michael Bisping. That was the only thing about that, which is actually not too different than this one, because they had Bisping fight GSP. While Whittaker was the interim champ, GSP beat Bisping and then vacated the belt. That seems like something similar that can happen here with Tom Aspinall, who wants to fight the champion, but the champion's going to be part of a big legacy fight, and then most likely retire after vacating that title. And I don't know if Aspinall's going to be promoted to the undisputed champ, or they're going to have him fight someone else for the vacant belt. There's a lot of weirdness with that title, so I wouldn't be shocked at any of these. That is, of course, if he gets past someone like Ciryl Gane. Because at that position, can he really refuse to fight Gane? So I'm very curious to see what Tom Aspinall's decision is going to be about this, because he said that he will not fight Gane. If that's his only option, does his opinion still hold true? Is he going to stick with that decision? Another questionable decision is Tony Ferguson and his whole thing with David Goggins. So not only is David Goggins been training him for this fight, of course Tony has to have other guys drilling him techniques and maybe getting into sparring a little bit here and there. I wonder how much he's doing that these days. But he is training with David Goggins. But not only is he training with David Goggins, he's going to have him in his corner. I don't know exactly what he sees in Goggins that has him glazed so much about it. From the outside perspective, it looks like cardio and mental training. That's what comes to David Goggins for MMA. Because obviously Tony's not going to run a marathon, right? So it's going to be general cardio and some kind of mental training as well. But these are two things that you would think Tony doesn't have an issue with. But who knows? Maybe he feels he needs them for some reason. The mind of a fighter is a very complicated thing, and perhaps going into this fight with Paddy Pimblett coming off a 6-loss streak, he may know that he's not in the right mental place and needs someone like Goggins to kick him back into that El Kukui place. The thing I'm concerned about for Tony Ferguson is overtraining. Because we know that Goggins seems to not take that seriously whatsoever. He should definitely speak with Michael Bisping about the realness of overtraining or any other elite athlete besides Tony, I guess. Overtraining's a real thing. It's a real science. There's a real science to it. It's not just some hoopla that people make for excuses. It can make you physically weaker. It can make you not take a punch the same way. Bisping specifically has talked about this, where he felt like he was much weaker in a fight when he was put into training camp. Because in training camp, he couldn't help himself but get carried away and he overtrained. And he felt like his power went away because of that. And when he came into the Luke Rockhold fight, for an example, on short notice, and he didn't overtrain, he carried power into that fight. You do have to also credit that to Luke Rockhold's lack of a chin. But then, with the Paulo Costa performance, he did take some really good shots. So that was a bit of an impressive chin performance for Luke Rockhold. The significance of overtraining needs to be highlighted here for Tony Ferguson. Robert Whittaker and Paulo Costa are talking about fighting each other, or it's actually more Whittaker who signed the contract apparently, and he's telling Paulo Costa to sign it. Costa ain't signed. That guy barely fights. He's a very funny guy. His fighting style is fun to watch. Not the most technical stuff, but very explosive and entertaining. But how many times have we gone through this? Where the contract to his opponent was signed, but he refuses to sign his. I'm still waiting to see about this whole I'm the most paid Brazilian fighter on the roster thing, right? If you are the most paid Brazilian fighter on the roster, you will absolutely try to take fights so you can get paid. If you're not fighting, you're not getting paid that most Brazilian payout. It's going to be sitting on your contract. He did get that one fight. He was supposed to fight Khamzat, so that was one thing. Let's see if he signs against Robert Whittaker, and if this is true, and now knowing that Whittaker and Costa is the targeted fight, what does that leave for Kamaru Usman, who talked about staying at 185? I wanted to see him fight Robert Whittaker. But with that out, I don't know who he goes up against at this point. Does he go back to 170? I don't think he's going to fight Belal Muhammad, as Belal is the backup fighter for Leon and Colby. And if he's the backup fighter, he's most likely going to get the next title shot then. That's not always true. Look at Mateusz Gamrot. Poor guy. He's fighting RDA now. I don't know what happened there. The guy was the backup fighter for the title shot and now is fighting RDA. No, and that's no disrespect to RDA, but it's like, that's a bit different, And the last thing about this UFC 296 card is it looks like that co-main event is really not getting much attention. I think Pantoja versus Royval is one of the best fights on that card, man. It can be such a good fight, but then again, Pantoja can run right through him as well. Royval does some interesting stuff out there. There are some things to study about his game, but at times, there seems to be a bit of risky chaos on his part that can get him some kind of flash win or can put him into the worst positions in a fight. And he gets an iron chin like Pantoja. Those rewards for his risks are not going to be as likely, even if he does catch him on some of that stuff. Right? If he throws a flying knee in Pantoja and doesn't knock him out, Pantoja grabs it, takes him down, Royval's going to be in some trouble. I think Pantoja will lock him down, will pull a pin on those scrambles, and take his back. Amanda Ribas building a youth institute? That's pretty cool. I gotta see more about that. In other news, it's great to hear that Jim Miller is going to fight on that 300 card. He deserves it more than anybody else, let's be honest here. Legend of the sport, absolute Hall of Fame fighter. And with that, let's go right to the questions. We're gonna start with the members first, and then we're gonna go to the public questions. We're gonna start with John Jordan. What odds would you put on Conor making his return to the octagon against a legitimate opponent, Chandler or someone of that caliber at least? I want to see him in there, but I have a feeling it may not happen. Thanks as always. No problem, man. What are the odds he faces a legitimate opponent? I mean, I'm pretty sure he's either going to fight Chandler. He could fight Gaethje maybe Max Holloway. I think someone on that level. It is not necessarily because he needs to fight someone high level. There's no low level guy that makes sense for Conor. But then again, we did say that about Donald Cerrone. Well, Donald Cerrone's not low level, but you know what I'm saying. Unless Conor calls that guy out, I don't know if they're going to do that again. I think they're just going to, they know that he's older. They know they got a very limited amount of time with him. And they're going to put him up against a big fighter like a Chandler, Dustin, Justin, Holloway, something like that. So I think the odds are pretty high that Conor fights someone who is legitimate, and that should be pretty fun. Then we go to the public questions. We're going to start with Payson. Should Kerry Hatley be fired for the atrocious Bobby Green stoppage? Alright, listen. Refs make mistakes, of course. We see some bad stoppages in the past, but this is like, I think this exceeds just making a mistake. You saw the guy get pummeled for so long. Moving his head is not defending himself, right? He's still getting hit while he's moving his head. So obviously he's not defending himself. And was it intelligently defending? Absolutely not. Maybe if he gets another mistake like that again, then yeah, fire him. I don't know Kerry Hatley's history of bad stoppages, but this is definitely one of the worst I've ever seen. It could have changed Bobby Green forever. So in that sense, I wouldn't mind his firing, or at least a suspension or something. But if he doesn't have a history of doing that kind of stuff and he's usually a good ref, I guess you could give him another chance. Then we're going to Mike M8. 3 questions, Mr. Weasel. Number 1, how would you rate Tatiana Suarez's chances against Zhang? Personally, I think she's the only fighter that can cause Zhang any kind of issues at this point. Yeah, I agree with you. Well, technically, I think Mackenzie Dern could give her problems, only if the fight somehow goes to the ground and Mackenzie Dern's on top. Then yes, Mackenzie Dern can give her some problems too in that specific position, but I don't think that position even happens. Tatiana Suarez in general is probably the most threatening style for Zhang Weili at the moment. She has an area of expertise that Zhang hasn't really improved too long at. She's a well-rounded fighter, but more recently she's zoned in on her wrestling, whereas Tatiana's been doing it for a very long time, and it translated MMA beautifully too. She's an extraordinary wrestler in the female divisions. You don't see many of them like her. So in that sense, yes. Your second question, where would you rank Eric Nicksick in terms of MMA coaches? Personally, I think he's very underrated, and his body of work, like the likes of Ngannou and Strickland, is very impressive, and is the frontrunner of Coach of the Year for me. Yes, he is absolutely the Coach of the Year. What he was able to do with Sean Strickland and Ngannou, going up against all the odds and performing as well as they did, is it all his credit? No, of course, but he is one of the big minds behind these 2 performances. In that sense, I think he is the Coach of the Year at this point. And I think right now he is one of the better coaches. I got to see how long the history of his work can progress. How long can Sean Strickland perform at that level? How far can Ngannou go into boxing? Because Ngannou was an extraordinary heavyweight regardless. You don't need too much to be a great heavyweight. Ngannou had a lot of natural talent to just automatically propel himself somewhat toward the top. But Ngannou did make a lot of good changes throughout his career, especially in boxing with Eric Nicksick. What he was able to do to Tyson Fury was something nobody saw. Number 3, do you think Ciryl Gane needs to leave France in order to realize his dreams of becoming undisputed champion? I feel like as soon as Ngannou lost to Stipe that first time, he knew he needed to get away and focus on adapting his full game, which wasn't possible with Coach Fernand Lopez. Great work, as always. Keep it up. Thank you so much, man. So, should Ciryl Gane make a similar kind of move that Ngannou made? How bad his wrestling awareness was in the John Jones fight does show that it's not just lacking, it's severely lacking against anybody that can wrestle at least to a decent skill level. And Ngannou obviously made the right choice. And the fact that we see that kind of result, I believe Ciryl Gane should also be thinking of a move, depending on where though. You know, coaches mesh with fighters differently. So he's gonna have to really go out there and see which coach is a right fit for him. Lopez is a decent enough striking coach, especially with heavyweights, at least able to get him to a competent enough of a level. Ciryl Gane automatically has an incredible athletic ability to work off of. He's a capable striker, but a lot of it is off of his athleticism, which is something he naturally just has. And Lopez is able to give him enough foundation for him to excel past most of the heavyweights. But Gane is able to get in on opponents and outside of danger a lot off of his athleticism. So not only would his grappling improve with another coach, I think his striking would as well. He does a lot of great stuff out there, but there are a lot of holes about Ciryl Gane's striking game. The way he backs away from danger is routinely based off athleticism. Tai Tuivasa of all fighters hit him for this. Sometimes he'll overextend on his cross after only minor conditioning work like the body jab to a mid-look misdirection against Jones. His steps could be a bit of a mess sometimes, going back foot first. So it just doesn't matter until he fights someone with a similar kind of speed, perhaps Aspinall or Jalin Almeida, or rival to superior skill level, like a guy like John Jones, perhaps even Tom Aspinall. And can you imagine if those holes get patched up and develop good takedown defense? Ciryl Gane is the kind of fighter that a lot of coaches will love to have around. I wouldn't mind seeing him in the AKA gym with those good wrestlers. I wouldn't mind seeing him with Mark Henry, right? I think Mark Henry does pretty decent with moving wrestlers, so he does understand some good footwork with good wrestling. Instead of focusing on offensive wrestling, which actually could work as well, I'm very interested to see if Ciryl Gane can grasp some kind of offensive wrestling and turn things on his head. A lot of people would reference GSP for an example, a striker who did have some good grappling, but really excelled later after he made a training switch. That could be interesting about Ciryl Gane. He is very athletic. I'm pretty sure he can grasp ideas very quickly. So Mark Henry would not be a bad fit. He can try Faraz Sahabi. Those guys do speak French over there, I believe, so it wouldn't be too hard for him to communicate. Yeah, Ciryl Gane is in pretty good hands, I think, in most gyms he goes to. And I would love to see it, man. Also, a lot of people do talk bad about Coach Lopez. I think Cedric Doumbé has like a big problem with that guy. I didn't dive too much into the whole drama with him and some of his past fighters that he used to train, but apparently there's a lot of guys that don't like him. And then we go to Amir Sangu. Love the channel. Always intrigued with how fighters prep themselves mentally. Based on what you've seen, what is the best mindset to have as a fighter? What is the worst mindset to have as a fighter? Has there been a time where you thought a specific mindset would absolutely have a fighter fail in their career? When it comes to mindset, I don't think there's a universal kind of mindset that it's going to work for every fighter. Different things work with different fighters. For an example, you hear Tom Aspinall admit to his fears about fighting, admit fear about even his opponent. But that kind of mindset will not work for like a Vanderlei Silva or a Robbie Lawler. But a Robbie Lawler mindset probably won't work for a Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall has to be focused on edge, fueled by some of the fear out of this fight in order to operate at an optimal level. Whereas some fighters need to feel like they are the hammer, like they're the ones to be feared in the cage. Conor McGregor needs to feel like he's the most confident man in the room. Nothing can touch him in the moment. He's all that matters in this environment. You have GSP who thinks kind of similar to Tom Aspinall in certain ways. But then you have someone like Alexandre Volkanovski, and in my opinion, I like Volkanovski's mindset more than anybody else's. He has a true fighter's mindset in the sense that he's always up for the challenge, always ready to learn for new challenges as well, adapting and adjusting constantly. If you ever heard him talk about techniques, game plans, and stuff like that, he's thinking on a completely different technical level. There's a load of fighters that don't think like that at all. They just go out there and fight. They go out there and let their body respond. But Volkanovski, his own mind's in the game and not just leaving it for his coaches. So as a guy who analyzes the sport, I do like the analytical mind that Volkanovski has, as well as the warrior mindset backed behind it. The drawback of that kind of mindset could be that he will stick too long. He'll stick around when he's over the hill. He'll stick around when he's far beyond the point of retirement, because he just loves it too much. He's so ingrained to the sport. Not only does he have to watch it, but he has to compete as well. I think Khabib has a great mindset for the game, and the fighters around him share some of that as well. He has a high sense of confidence, especially with his own skill set, while being objective enough about the challenges that are ahead. And he will not change his entire approach depending on who the fighter is. For example, like Volkanovski. Volkanovski changed a lot of what he usually does and certain offensive techniques when he fought Yair Rodriguez. It was a completely different thing when he fought Islam or Brian Ortega or Korean Zombie. He will change some of the stuff that he does to fit the style of his opponent. Khabib doesn't operate that same way. Khabib will only make minor changes, tune the instrument just a little bit to address some of the challenges, depending if he fights Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, Conor McGregor, but his overall general style does not change. His pace is usually uniform. I would say the main fight where Khabib slowed down the pace a bit was when he fought Al Quinta on short notice. That was the time that Khabib changed his approach to a more drastic degree, but when he has a game plan against a certain opponent, is not taking up on short notice, he usually fights them in a very similar kind of way with smaller technical changes. He's still going to shoot the single on every opening you make. He's still going to get aggressive at some point in the fight, whether it's early or not. Like against Conor McGregor, he was not pressuring early. He was actually moving away to feel out some of that timing and the rhythm of Conor, specifically when he's going to throw the left kick or the left hand, and then he's going to shoot. But then against Justin Gaethje, he brought the fight to him right away. Sometimes you have to attack the powerful opponent to put them out of their own game, but the counters he's looking for are generally very similar to each opponent. It's just how he's going to bring out those openings is a bit different depending on the style he's going up against. He needed Gaethje to overextend. He needed Gaethje to throw some kick out there while he's pressuring him. That's going to make the takedowns a lot easier to get on him specifically. Against Conor McGregor, there are a lot more mix-ups. There are a lot more open shots. Understand the counter stance is a lot more wide. He's not going to be as aware against an open shot to like maybe a wrestler like Justin Gaethje will be instinctively, or like the approach he had against Michael Johnson. Understanding the speed that is the challenge in the southpaw left hand, he had to feel out a couple different things here before he attacks. So Khabib had a certain kind of tempo and rhythm with his footwork, specifically good linear bounces with reinforced left pivots to specifically get his foot on the outside, occasionally eliminating some of those openings for Michael Johnson. But Johnson will still throw the left hand at times, even with that. And that's a great thing for Khabib to get the feeling and the timing from Johnson. For the first minute of that fight, you could definitely see Khabib having a bit of trouble with the speed. He knew exactly what to do with his footwork, and actually, his game plan was correct. When he would have the forward bounce, the bait was getting bitten on the whole time. Michael Johnson always fired forward when Khabib stepped closer. So the bait was there and it was working, but the speed was still causing the punch to connect. And occasionally Michael Johnson would get that outside foot to line it up a little bit better. And Johnson was utilizing a good lead knee feint, which will do a couple different things here. It's going to, one, discourage any kind of sudden takedown from Khabib. And number two, you tend to see it disrupt the rhythm of Khabib. You'll see Khabib sometimes freeze and sit in front of Johnson, which could line him up for some left hands. Specifically, good left hands to the body, as Khabib would stand up a little bit taller after respecting that knee feint. So Khabib had to find a point where he can get aggressive and kind of bulldoze his way into Michael Johnson and waiting for the timing of the left hand. And as soon as Michael Johnson shoulder feinted, leaned to his own right, that's when Khabib pounced onto him with a good left angular jab and then went into him linear. The left hand does come and Khabib is able to shoot under and take him to the ground. So it is like a different kind of thing with Khabib, but you could still tell the openings he's looking for and the way he counters them is very similar across a lot of his opponents. Just the way he draws these out could be a bit different depending on the style he's going up against. Sorry, that was a little long. Now, the worst mindset to have as a fighter is if you're just too afraid of the opponent, like Ryan Bader fighting Rumble. You could say Ciryl Gane fighting Jones, perhaps. Then we'll go to Kevin Tron. Yoski, Mr. Weasel, love the podcast. Thank you so much, man. It seems like a point where it looked like wrestlers and grapplers were dominating the sport. However, now it looks like strikers are coming back and running the sport. Why is that? Love your videos. Keep up the good work. Thank you so much, man. You're seeing wrestlers still succeed in taking fighters down, but you're seeing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specifically having a bit of an issue in the current landscape of MMA. And the basic answer to that, they're not evolving with it as much as some of the other martial arts. Strikers have to learn wrestling. They have to learn takedown defense. They have to learn how to get up from the bottom. There's never been too much of an incentive for wrestlers and grapplers to have to learn striking. Like, you have to learn or you're going to lose. This sport has been catered around grapplers for so long. For a long time, they didn't have to learn competent striking. As long as they can hit hard and transition with the wrestling, they could do pretty well until now. Now wrestlers have to learn the striking. So the dominance from striking at the moment is going to force the wrestlers of today to become way more dangerous for tomorrow. So cherish it while it lasts. In the near future, you're going to see wrestlers and more specifically Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu grapplers evolve so far, the pendulum's going to swing right back around. There's a basic understanding of takedown defense and being so defensive against general Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu skills, not creating those kind of openings, and hand fighting has become such a big thing now. Crazy it took this long, but the ability to hand fight while getting up from the bottom has become a bit of an art of itself at this point. Leon Edwards used this pretty well against someone like Kamaru Usman. Volkanovski used this quite a bit against Islam Makhachev. So it's like you're presenting openings on your position, but you're tying and focusing on the opponent's hands. It's very hard for him to act on those open positions, you know what I'm saying? Footwork is becoming way better now, which is given a bit of an issue for a lot of the wrestlers who aren't keeping up with the evolution of footwork, just generally speaking. Fighters are using the cage to stand up better than ever before. Then we go to Grimthur. Who do you think is the rumored super fight in 2024? Yo, I'm thinking it's Alex Pereira versus Adesanya. Because what else is, if it's not Conor, who else can it be? The next biggest fight is Alex Pereira versus Adesanya 3. And I think Adesanya has been kind of playing with the fans about, I'm not going to fight for a long time. I'm starting to think that they know they're fighting each other. Yo, that'd be awesome. If they fought each other every weekend, everybody would watch. I don't know what other fight it could be. Tom Aspinall is probably going to be fighting Ciryl Gane. That's not a super fight. Strickland maybe could come back. Let's say if he beats Dricus, maybe he can make a quick turnaround and go up and fight Pereira. I guess that's an option. We know Leon and Colby aren't going to fight until like December of next year. Islam is not going to fight during Ramadan. Volkanovski's most likely not going to fight. I mean, that guy's fighting in February. Sean O'Malley's a month before that. Does Ronda Rousey come back? Is that the super fight? I don't know what else it could be. It has to include Conor, Pereira, or maybe Ronda Rousey. I don't see any other quote-unquote super fight for UFC 300. Then with the Dev. It was absolutely ridiculous seeing Bobby fight with his hands down like that against someone with such a reach advantage. After the first few exchanges, man, I was tense seeing him keep leaning away like that. Only was a matter of time. Can't win like that against the top guys, man. I agree. Keeping your hands down can work against long fighters, but you gotta have some superb head movement. I'm talking about Pernell Whittaker kind of stuff. And Jalin Turner isn't just some tall, long guy. This guy is super precise and fast, with that incredible reach. And leaning away from a tall guy is one of the worst things you can do. You're pretty much giving yourself up to them. You throw out the window all of your defenses. All they gotta do is follow up on their punch, because generally, if Bobby Green's gonna lean away from Jalin Turner, he's gonna lean away from the first punch. Now he's overloading on the back foot, and he can't really move fast enough if Turner wants to follow up. So all Turner has to do is follow up, and he's going to land. Now, lateral head movement could be a little bit different, but leaning so heavily, looking for the counter hook, it could be very easy for taller and especially slimmer strikers to get their shoulder on the inside, connecting directly to the head. He can hide behind the shoulder for defense, get out perfectly fine while landing a devastating shot with full leverage of that reach. It's crazy. Bobby Green is a fun fighter. I like the guy a lot, man, but he seems to be only molded for fun matchups, probably low top 15, outside the top 15. Jalin Turner has the skills to be absolutely like top 7. It's just sometimes he makes some defensive mistakes that get him caught, but he performed beautifully against Bobby Green. Then we get to Pedro Correa. Hi, Weasel from Portugal. Shout out to Portugal. Do you see Manel Kape beating Kai Kara and ever becoming a champion? I think he's maybe 2 wins away from a title shot. He has a very unique pocket boxing game. Kai Kara-France is powerful there too, so it could be a very fun exchange between them. Kai seems to load up a lot more in the pocket, and Manel Kape, he will sometimes bring his hands right in front of him and fire just from stance. So getting to the target could be better for Manel Kape in those kind of exchanges before Kai leverages for some of those big shots. But Kai has a very good jab. He has some good kicks. From range, Manel Kape could fall short into some counters, but then again, he does have a flying knee out of nowhere that can catch you if he times you well. The main thing is he's really got to get an understanding of Kai's rhythm. If Kai comes out there with a constant rhythm and doesn't change it up, Manel Kape has to do a good job of not giving a reason for Kai to switch that up. He could absolutely catch him with something big from the open. But I think he will do his best work in the pocket with Kai Kara. So that would be his way where he could beat Kai Kara-France, in my opinion. The guy also has just natural, absurd power. He doesn't need that much leverage in order to hurt you. And incredibly good eyes while he's throwing his own combinations. That's very rare to see in a lot of fighters. Now, that's not to say that I'm picking Manel Kape to beat Kai Kara, but he definitely has that chance. Now, can he become champion? Yes, I do think he can. He definitely has a chance at that. If he beats Kai Kara-France, who's one of the better guys in the top 5, I think he's like 1 win away to a title shot. Then we get the Bros Dead. Who are your favorite dark horse fighters? I think guys like Elvis Brenner and Matusz Rebecki at lightweight, who are both very exciting to watch and incredibly talented, if not well known besides from hardcore fans. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much, man. Nurullo Veliev because he looks like Khabib. No, I'm just kidding. You just took mine. Rebecki is like the guy for me. I'm very high on him, man. His striking is coming together. He's powerful. He's very strong physically. He has a lot of good foundation to work off of. The only thing is he is short. He's 5'7", but with his wrestling style, his takedowns can be pretty hard to handle, and those overhands become a natural interception to a lot of his opponents. Chandler has a similar natural strength there too, but stands very differently to Rebecki. Chandler is wide and linear, whereas Rebecki is compact and omnidirectional, which could definitely add more wrinkles. I love the way he gets opponents to constantly move into his left hand. He forces good movements, has good control of how his opponent is laterally moving along the cage. He wants to line them up for the left hand and usually transitions into some kind of takedown. And at times, it can be pretty difficult to see which one he wants to commit with. Even when he intercepts you with the left hand, he will dig to the body instead of transitioning for a takedown. And the opponent is thinking takedown. Now, naturally, that's going to cause some of his opponents to drop their hands and then instinctively block their body when they feel like a body shot's coming. So there's a lot of things he can mask up here. From the left hand to the head, body shots, and takedowns. It's hard to really tell at times which one he wants to really commit for. Like against Roberts, for an example, he actually wanted him to move out away from the left hand specifically and toward the cage. So it was really specific on where Roberts was positioning himself. And you saw constantly Rebecki was feinting with the left hand. He wasn't actually throwing it out there, trying to intercept Roberts' right movement, because Roberts was moving into the left hand. And Rebecki still refused to throw it. Instead, he wanted to draw out some of Roberts' counters, so Roberts was more focused on the left hand and the takedown, right? But he wasn't focused on Rebecki's feet. Pause. Like, if you guys want to go back and watch that fight, go like to 4 minutes and 31 seconds. Look how, for an example, Roberts was standing still, being completely focused on Rebecca's left hand. He was standing still in front of him. But what was Rebecca doing? Don't focus on Rebecca's hand like Roosevelt Roberts. Focus on what Rebecca was doing with his movement. He did not stand right in front of Roberts. He was moving slowly to his right side. Even though Roberts is not in the opposite stance, Rebecca still wants to fill in that right space. Filling in that right space is going to create some kind of control for Rebecca on Roosevelt Roberts' movements. And still not committing with the left hand, he was drawing out the counters of Roberts and also trying to force him into the right side so he can have a closer entry for the takedown. If Roberts moves out to his left while Rebecca is filling in that space, they're going to get closer together and Rebecca has a much better shot to the target. Rebecca did get backed up from the knee, but then eventually re-engaged by trying to keep that right space, eventually did commit with the left hand and went right under for the takedown. Roosevelt Roberts was completely unaware of Rebecca's footwork. He can muscle you to the ground if he wants, if he has a deep enough shot. Rebecca is a powerhouse, man, and some of his head movement can be a bit too dramatic. Maybe it's the sense of himself just being so short against such a tall opponent like Roosevelt Roberts, for an example, that he needs to move his head like that in order for himself to feel like he's safe. Dramatic head movements can also get you knocked out. Just depends how the opponent times you. But that early, tall, and long opponent for Rebecca is very good experience to go up against because he stood on the feet with that guy for like 45 seconds, felt a lot of things out there. That's some good experience for Rebecca. Because you're not going to get much guys taller and longer than Roosevelt Roberts at lightweight. And trying to scramble your way out from under this guy, it's so difficult. It's like trying to kick out a fire hydrant from on top of you. There's not a lot of limbs to hook onto, you know what I'm saying? The guy's like a big ball of muscle. And he uses that kind of muscle to great effect. I mean, the forearm chokes to force transitions. Rebecca's really good, man. Another good dark horse, I like Jonathan Martinez. Great feints, great execution with the kicks, good targeting. He's on a very good win streak at the moment. Uses some good left hip feints to throw off the timing of Adrian Yanez, for an example, then able to land the kicks afterward. And I think Yanez gave him too much to work with before even throwing strikes, specifically with a lot of those hand traps. Yanez kept giving him his lead hand over and over again because he's trying to feel out the range, right? But from neutral like that, Martinez has a natural advantage with that power kick. He doesn't need to feel before he throws as much as Yanez does. So because Yanez was establishing a rhythm early, he gave Martinez a lot to work with, even like a minute and a half into the fight. That's even where like Yanez was trying to get the outside foot in order to line up his right hand. Martinez was just simply back up in the opposite direction and fire out the kick when Yanez does not have his angle. Range control for Martinez was beautifully used against Adrian Yanez. And he did that a couple times in the fight. Yanez was trying to get his angles, but then as soon as he stopped because he couldn't get it, that's when Martinez will slam that kick. And those feints from Martinez were not even like big either. Just simple, slight hip feints and offsets his opponent. They don't know when that kick is going to come. There was that one leg kick like 2 minutes and 20 seconds of the first round where Yanez was giving him too much bounce, right? He's giving him too much of a rhythm to work with. He kept bouncing slightly back and forth. Very, very slightly. And Martinez was simply just timing it. The simple bounces on when to throw the kick. He would reach forward with the lead hand, watch the movement, and as soon as Yanez bounced slightly forward, that's when Martinez threw the kick. Moving away with the hooks, carrying a guard, and following through with the leg kick. I mean, just beautiful work from Jonathan Martinez in that last fight. Big dark horse of that bantamweight division. And he's on a huge win streak, too. Then we'll go to the next question. I apologize, it's hard to pronounce that name. Iktish Amnakyadan. Hey Weasel, I learned a lot from watching your videos and I never skip one. How do you think Figgy does against the top 5 of the bantamweight division after his performance against Rob Font? Keep up the good work, man. Thank you so much. Yeah, there was a lot of people doubting Deiveson Figueiredo in that fight. I understand some of the reasons why, but Figgy's underrated, man. But how does he do against the top 5? I think he loses to Petr Yan, but Yan is not that consistent. If Yan is fighting at his best, I think he wins. And Deiveson doesn't have that kind of overwhelming, aggressive style to throw Yan off early. Corey Sandhagen. I'd probably go with Corey Sandhagen. Henry Cejudo. They would never fight each other. But I would say, at this point, probably Deiveson Figueiredo. The wrestling will be tough for Figgy, but Cejudo's going to have some trouble in the stand-up. Merab Dvalishvili. I'm definitely going to go with Merab. Aljamain Sterling. I will definitely go with Sterling. And then Sean O'Malley. I'm going to go with O'Malley. He showed enough takedown defense against Aljamain Sterling to give me more confidence in his chances of stopping Davidson's takedowns. Then with the BTR show, with Bellator being acquired by the PFL, do you believe the PFL is the second most talent-rich promotion outside the UFC? Or do you think it's one? Hope you have a happy holidays, bro. You deserve it. You too, man. Hope everybody does. So I think the PFL is the second most talent-rich promotion, only for MMA. But I like one. I like one a lot. It's like a different feel. You know what I'm saying? It's like, there's like a prestigious feeling about watching that, or like a clean feeling, you know? I don't want to say Bushido, but it does have that sort of sense. Almost like some of the fights in Pride back in the day had. It feels so traditional when you're watching one. And they have some of the best strikers in the world, whether it's in MMA or Muay Thai. But the PFL acquiring Bellator is pretty big. Then we get to Mystic Cherry. Hey Weasel, love the channel. With Arman's big win, you could now make an argument that he, Gaethje, and Charles all deserve a title shot. Who do you think deserves the next shot, and what do you do with the other two? And how do you see Islam going against these three? Interesting question. This is like a big topic right now. Who fights Islam next? You could make an argument for Oliveira or Gaethje. I don't have a problem with either of them. If I were to choose, I like to see the rematch of Charles Oliveira, because I think Islam might run right through Gaethje. Whereas with Charles, he has the kind of grappling to not just get absolutely destroyed once they touch the mat. And the striking is always going to be dangerous with Charles Oliveira. Gaethje has dangerous striking, but can he stop the takedown? Maybe one or two. But again, the Dagestani wrestlers don't just shoot once or twice. They shoot all the time. It doesn't matter if you defend one or two. You got to defend all of them, man. One takedown and that's it. Like, the fight completely changes. But at the end of the day, I just want to see Islam fight one of these guys. What do you do with the other two? Have them fight each other, regardless of who it is. So if like Charles fights Islam next, then have Arman fight Gaethje. If Gaethje's fighting Islam next, then have Charles fight Arman. I think it's the only way you can go about it at this point. Again, Max was talked about, but I think Max should fight Aljamain Sterling. Makes way more sense for everybody involved. And how does Islam do against these three? I think he beats all three of them. I think Arman can give him the most competitive fight, but he loses like a decision or something. I think Charles has the best chance of finishing Islam, which makes the fight very exciting, but I think Charles gets knocked out or submitted. And then Gaethje, I think he has the worst chance out of the three. I don't see him stopping all the takedowns, and as soon as one of them lands, that fight is over. And then we get to A5 suited. Hey Weasel, love your videos. How well do you think Alex Pereira would do in heavyweight boxing? Do you think he could become a champion in 3 combat sports? It is heavyweight boxing, so yeah, he could. He could. I don't like his chances, though, against like Tyson Fury or Alexandre Usyk. Pereira does not have the greatest chin. He's gotten hurt in MMA already against much smaller guys than Tyson Fury, right? Can you imagine Tyson Fury landing these kind of shots on Alex Pereira? And Pereira's a good boxer, but he's not like insane at it. Specifically only boxing. He's a good overall striker. That's what he does best when he mixes it all up. He needs the leg kicks. He needs the body kicks. The range is very different from boxing to kickboxing, and I don't think he likes that boxing range too much, especially against bigger guys. He does his best work from the outside before he capitalizes in close, and he would not have that option in boxing. Everything would have to be in close, and I think he can absolutely get clipped. Now, he does have power. He can knock out anybody. That's a big reason why I do believe he could get the better of some of the heavyweight boxers, potentially. The odds would probably say no, but he definitely does have a chance at least. Here's the thing, Francis Ngannou couldn't knock out Tyson Fury with a pretty decent shot. He hit him big a couple times. These are bigger gloves and stuff, so it's going to be interesting. Pereira is much more precise with what he throws. He's a lot better at setting up his power shots than Francis Ngannou is. He is faster than Ngannou, but I don't like his defense when the opponent presses forward on him. Reaching forward like that, mainly relying on backward head movement. Horrible stuff against a guy like Tyson Fury. Some of his lateral head movement can be pretty nice. Some of his leans can be good, but he doesn't go to them as often. He mainly goes to them when he's trying to line up the left hook. That is the point where he could catch some of these guys, but I think overall, I would say he would lose absolutely to the heavyweight champs. Then with the John Juan. When Islam fought Charles, he rarely got hit clean. How did he manage this considering Charles hurts everybody in the first round? But it seemed like Islam saw everything coming and countered with the straight left each time, followed up by the right hook. Does Islam have underrated eyes in terms of seeing punches way before they land? Therefore, he's able to move out of range and not get hit by big shots. Yeah, it's something I've talked about many times. Islam Makhachev and even Khabib have very good eyes. They see things coming before most fighters do. Even though they don't have like the best kind of defensive technique, their reflexes are faster than most. This is why a lot of people used to think that Khabib just had like sloppy defense, but still got away with things. Well, his defense, number one, is underrated, but his reflexes are faster than so many other fighters. He reacts quicker and gets away from shots, or if he does get hit, he'll roll with the punches. But the thing about Charles Oliveira in that fight was he was loading up a lot. not too many setups. He's going up against the opposite stance fighter, so there's a lot of lead touches that he can work with here to soften some of the telegraph and condition Islam a bit. But he really wanted to get that right hand on his chin, and it's very difficult to hit someone like Islam Makhachev with shots like that. Then we go to Light Yagami, who is the lightweight GOAT. If it's Khabib, what will it take for Islam to overtake him? Considering 2 of his title defenses are against a featherweight, does he need 3 or 4 lightweight fighters as title defense? So yes, Khabib is the greatest lightweight of all time still. He has the most title defenses while also competing up against solid competition, undefeated, never scathed in a fight, only lost like a couple rounds in his whole career. Just uncanny feats from Khabib Nurmagomedov. For Islam Makhachev to take over that spot, I mean, some people will say that beating Alexandre Volkanovski is not as impressive for a lightweight to do, but we do have to give credit to Islam for those wins. Volkanovski is not some bad fighter. He can be smaller, but he did weigh a lot for both those fights. I believe his weight was not even far off from Islam's in the first fight even, where they both prepared for it. So saying that Volkanovski's like so much smaller than Islam isn't really accurate. He's a lot shorter, as he is against even Max Holloway, for an example, or Brian Ortega. He's much shorter than most of his opponents. You have to give Islam the credit for those wins and not devolve Alexander Volkanovski as just some featherweight that Islam beat. But I will say that beating lightweight contenders is something that Islam has to do. It's something he's most likely gonna do from now on. This is why a lot of people want to see him fight Justin Gaethje, because it's a new matchup. It's another lightweight contender he's never went up against. And if he can go and beat someone like Gaethje, that's going to propel his legacy as one of the greatest lightweights of all time. At this point, do you consider him top 3, top 5? For me, I would say right now Khabib's number 1, Charles Oliveira's number 2, mainly because of the stats that they have, mainly because of how many title defenses they got, the finishes, and all that stuff. But Islam, I would probably say, is number 3, maybe, right before Benson Henderson. And if he goes and beats Justin Gaethje, for an example, that will be 3 title defenses. It'd be a competition between him and Charles Oliveira in terms of greatness at that point. And if he gets another one, let's say he gets a 4th title defense, and then if he gets another one, then I'd probably put him above Khabib. So 2 or 3 more wins, and you could regard him as the greatest lightweight of all time. And then last question, we're going to go to Yeah Buddy. Why is Mike Perry so good at bare knuckle? What traits fighter needs to be successful in it compared to regular boxing? Now, how do you think Conor would do in BKFC? In the Burger King Fighting Championships? He's got the dog in him, man. That's what it is. Mike Perry's just able to wear all the damage and return fire. Bare knuckle boxing doesn't have like elite boxers. You know, a lot of these guys are former MMA fighters that would get destroyed in boxing. In fact, Mike Perry had a boxing match before and got knocked out. Wasn't as good as he is now, but the talent in bare knuckle is nowhere close to traditional boxing. I would say bare knuckle boxing is more comparable to the best guys in YouTube boxing in terms of skills. But then again, there was Paulo Malignaggi. Paulo Malignaggi did compete in bare knuckle. He didn't get damaged too much, right? He just didn't do enough offensively to win the fight. And he was out for a very, very long time. But he was the best pure boxer to compete in bare knuckle. And he lost to Artem Lobov. Different dynamic with no gloves. You can't rely on the same kind of defenses in order to get away from shots, and every single punch can cause some kind of cosmetic damage that naturally impacts the fight, either mentally or physically. When you see your own cosmetic damage or your opponent's, man, it could like trigger something different. I think for Mike Perry, it makes him stronger. Like, he loves it. He even said like he needs to get punched a couple times in order to really have fun with the fight. He's different, man. Conor McGregor, I think, would do very well. Conor's used to MMA gloves, so no gloves is going to be barely different for him. I honestly think he would beat almost all these guys. The only problem he's going to have with our guys like Mike Perry, just take damage and keep going. You know, like a Nate Diaz, you know what I'm saying? The guys who could just keep fighting forward no matter how much damage is inflicted on them. And Mike Perry could be one of those nightmares that Conor McGregor would have to deal with. But I do think Conor would be the best. Now, there's not going to be History with the Weasel, this podcast, because I'm going to do a podcast on Sunday, all history, on my second channel. So feel free if you guys want to watch, listen to it. It's going to be pretty fun. I got some friends I'm going to talk history with. They know quite a bit as well. Something fun and different to do. And I'll leave the link to that channel in the description. So I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. And if you did, make sure to give this a like, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video.